My name is Jeanette, and I want to thank you for joining me on the channel Jane Reads. So today is day 5 of Bookmas. I'm pretty sure I know what's in this one. If my friend has stuck to my schedule, because I like to have a schedule and a routine. And normally on the 5th of the month, I post my monthly wrap up from the month before. So I'm really hoping that's what's in here today so that I can do that. So I do have my notes ready so that hopefully she doesn't mess with my brain and ruin my schedule. But okay, so let's get to it. Bookmas Day 5. November reads, the November wrap up. Okay, so I got my notes from my wheel spin. Okay, so as per usual, I spun 6 times, and I'm going to just briefly go over the books I read and then I'll go into the reviews. Lowest rated came up twice on my wheel, and for that I chose to read Reluctant Runaway and Reluctant Burglar by Jill Elizabeth Nelson. These are books 1 and 2 of a series, so I will talk about them. Then historical fiction came up, and I read A Christmas Bargain by Shanna Hatfield. Then male author came up twice, and for that I read Capital Gains by Chip Gaines, and I read No Time Like the Future by Michael J. Fox. Then the last spin was newest on my TBR, so for that I read Targeted. It was a novella collection by Lynette, Eason, Lynn H. Blackburn, and Natalie Walters. Okay, so in total I read 9 books, so I added 3 other books that were not part of my planned TBR. And I didn't read in order of my planned TBR, which I normally do, but I don't know. I read so out of order this time. Because normally, whatever I get on wheel 1, I spin first, or I read first. Whatever I get on wheel 2, I read second. And this time, completely all over the place. So the first book that I read this month was No Time Like the Future by Michael J. Fox. I didn't really enjoy this book. I gave it 2 stars, and I had borrowed this book from a friend, and I've since returned it. But I did film a clip of my thoughts on this book, so I will insert that here now. Okay, so I just finished reading Michael J. Fox, No Time Like the Future. This book was loaned to me by a friend. She had read it and really enjoyed it and thought I might enjoy it too. Now, I have to say, I don't have a connection to Michael J. Fox. I have never seen Back to the Future. I have watched Family Ties, but in reruns, like I didn't grow up with it. And Spin City, I watched a little bit, but not a lot. Never seen The Good Wife when he was on it. So I know his story that, he was diagnosed with early onset of Parkinson's disease, and that's about what I know of him. I struggled with this book. It covers the time period of 2018, basically when a tumor was found on his spine and he had to have back surgery to have it removed. And then it talks about that time and the recovery process through it. And then kind of the doctor says, like, do not fall, because, he just had back surgery and that could be detrimental. But the fact that he has Parkinson's, moving is difficult. He ends up falling about 5-6 months after the back surgery and breaks his arm. Not with a traditional break, a bad break. And so then he has to go through all the rehab again, and kind of it changes everything. So basically, the book is all detailing his whole recovery process. The subtitle of the book is An Optimist Considers Mortality. And I did not feel like he was very optimistic throughout this book. It felt very depressing and pessimistic, and it was very disjointed. He would talk about something and then all of a sudden it would jump to something else and talk about that, and it didn't really give time to kind of accept what he was saying or had just said. I was taken aback on the amount of curse words that are included. I mean, it's not overwhelming, but it's a lot more than I'm used to. And just because you speak that way doesn't mean it needs to be written down that way. That's my personal opinion. So I was kind of like, if my friend hadn't loaned it to me and said that she really enjoyed it, I probably would have DNF'd it near the beginning because I wasn't into it. I just didn't care. So the one thing I did take out of it was really kind of interesting is it provided an idea of what it's like to live with a movement disorder and having to think and plan through every physical motion that you do, and yet still experience a disconnect that leads to spasms and falls. I do know somebody, or did know somebody personally, that had Parkinson's, but when I knew them, they had just recently been, I just lost the word, diagnosed with it. So they were in the very early stages, and they were in their early 60s when they were diagnosed. Then they moved away a few years later, so I didn't really see kind of how it progressed over time. But so, I mean, that was interesting. And there was one really good quote that I highlighted. Well, I didn't highlight in the book, that I wrote down, was good things can come from bad things. And that is a God thing, right? God can use all the bad stuff in our life and turn it into good stuff. So I gave this book 2 stars because it wasn't for me. But as I said, I don't have the connection to him that others might. And so, yeah, that's it. Okay, so the second book that I read this month was the novella collection Targeted. This is 3 book novellas. Each individual story includes characters from other books by these authors. So the first novella is On the Run by Lynette Eason. In this one, Daria is an FBI analyst who is injured when someone attacks her at her home. She ends up at Rikers Hospital for treatment. While there, someone tries to kidnap her. She goes on the run, and Riker insists on going with her to help her. There was a lot of action and gripping moments that had me on the edge of my seat, and I really enjoyed the reappearance of characters from previous books, because I have read a lot of Lynette Eason's books. I think I'm caught up, and I recognized the characters. I even recognized Riker from previous ones and Daria, so it was kind of like, this was kind of cool to get their story. My favorite quote from this one is, "What someone meant for evil, God took and turned it into something good." So then novella number 2 was Deadly Objective by Lynn H. Blackburn. In this one, Emily is a physical therapist to the vice president's 16-year-old son, Mason. Liam is a Secret Service agent assigned to Mason. We quickly learn that Emily and Liam have become friends somewhat over various encounters due to their mutual work with Mason. When an attack happens at the VIP's house, everyone is taken to a safe house. It is then decided that Mason would be best protected by going on a camping trip, previously planned with Liam. Emily gets roped into going along. I did not know any of these characters prior to reading this story, but I really enjoyed getting to know Liam and Emily. Both Liam and Emily are readers, and they have a very entertaining conversation with Mason that left me laughing and agreeing with Emily's perspective. I really enjoyed following the budding relationship, and it felt realistic. This was definitely my favorite of the collection. So then, novella number 3 was Caught in the Crosshairs by Natalie Walters. CIA officer Claudia gets summoned to a house. Upon arriving, she walks into a crime scene and quickly becomes a suspect. CIA officer Ari is brought in to investigate and quickly determines that Claudia is the target. Neither trust each other, but can they work together to figure out what is happening and why? I had trouble following who all the individuals were and what their connection was. The romance developed way too quickly for my liking, within 48 hours of meeting. I have not read anything by Miss Walters before, so I had no connection to any of these characters. I received this as an advanced reader copy from Rebel, and overall I gave it 3 stars. But I've said this before, I am not a huge novella person. I just find them too short to really get to know the characters, get into the story. So, yeah. So then, the next 3 books I read were the series of To Catch a Thief. So book number 1 was Reluctant Burglar. Book number 2 is Reluctant Runaway. And book number 3 is Reluctant Smuggler. And this is by Jill Elizabeth Nelson. This is an older series, probably 2008, 2006, 7, and 8 is when they were first published. It does follow the same characters the whole way through. Desi is the main character of all 3 of them, and then her romantic love interest also plays a very big role in all 3, and her best friend Max plays a very big role. So each story builds off of the one from before. So I don't want to talk too much about it because, like, I can tell you about book 1 because it introduces us to the character. So Desi runs an internationally known security firm with her father. They specialize in art protection. Desi's father ends up getting murdered, and the FBI is sure that her father was involved in an art theft ring, and that led to his murder. Desi knows that her father is innocent and enlists her best friend to investigate her father's death. But as clues are discovered, Desi begins to suspect that people she trusts are involved. She doesn't know who she can trust and is worried, so she tries to keep everything to herself. I did find that it started slow, and at times I struggled following exactly what was happening, but as I got further in, it picked up. And I began to feel like I was right there with Desi trying to put the clues together. I did like that Desi eventually took the risk and trusted the FBI agent. I enjoyed their secret meetings and was glad when she decided to take a chance and trust this person. I enjoyed that they were able to work together and figure out who they could trust and bring down the correct people. There was a certain character that I was unsure of if we could trust, and I hoped they were innocent because I really liked them. There is a romance that develops for Desi, and I look forward to seeing how it progresses in the next book. So I gave this one 3 stars because it started slow and picked up. But then once I got to know the characters and really got into it, I was hooked on the characters. I moved on to book number 2, which is Reluctant Runaway. And so basically this one is carrying on with Desi and her relationship with the FBI agent. This one is set in Boston, and then this one is mainly set in New Mexico area. And they are investigating the disappearance of Desi's best friend's niece. but she also worked at an art museum, and some items go missing around the same time as her disappearance. Are they connected or not? So they begin investigating and looking to that one. I was really invested in the story and wanting to know what was going to happen, especially on the relationship side. So I gave this one 4 stars. Then, as soon as I finished this one, I picked up book 3, which I also gave 4 stars. This one takes place mainly in Mexico, with a few scenes in Boston, but a lot of it is in Mexico. And Desi gets sent there working with a museum to investigate something, and events just keep happening. There was one. So within a 48-hour time period, Desi is robbed, knocked down, threatened, nearly arrested, and then takes a private jet from Mexico to New York, then rides a snowplow in the middle of a blizzard to get to the hospital in Boston. Her fiancé has been shot, nearly drowns in the ocean, and is in coma with life-threatening injuries. Can he survive? So much happens with Desi's case and the FBI case, which should be 2 separate cases, but they intermingle. I really didn't care that much for the cases themselves. Again, it was really the characters and the relationship that I was so rooting for to work out. I was hooked and loved it, and I really like the way this ends. This was definitely my favorite of the series. So then the next book I read was Capital Gains by Chip Gaines. I gave this one 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this. I felt like I was sitting with Chip and just hearing him tell his story. And just hearing from him and kind of what motivates him each and every day is not about making money per se or becoming famous. It's about family and caring for people and doing what you feel is right. He encourages readers to find their passion, whether it be through work, family, or hobby, but find what motivates you to get up each and every day. He is very positive and has an optimistic outlook on life, and he's much more than the funny, goofy guy that we got to know on the show Fixer Upper. He has a true passion for his family. It was obvious he has a very strong work ethic to continue doing what he does every single day and get as much done as he does. I really appreciated that he shared that his employees are more than just employees. He cares about them individually. The one thing I didn't like is he wasn't very helpful with new employees and just left them to figure it out on their own rather than showing them or giving them some training. So that would have really frustrated me as an employee. So that was one kind of negative aspect from the way he does things. He was very thankful and acknowledges the people that helped him along the way and the financial backing that he had to be able to even take the risk that he took to establish the shop or the different businesses he had along the way. I really enjoyed the message of trusting God and not second-guessing your choices. Each decision has a ripple effect that affects us. This book left me thinking about what I'm passionate about and how can I use those passions in my life. So after reading that one, I moved on to my Christmas read, kind of a comfort read, and that was The Christmas Bargain by Shanna Hatfield. I was so looking forward to reading this one because I've talked about it before. I really enjoy this story. I just do. It was my 4th time reading this book. I really enjoy the story of 2 strangers ending up married and growing to care about one another. So I'm not going to talk about this one much because I've talked about it quite a bit in different things. My most recent one was in my Christmas read, so I will link that video below. Basically, Luke is the local banker. He goes to Philly's house to collect a debt from her dad. Her dad can't pay, so he gives Luke his daughter as payment. they end up getting married so that, you know, he doesn't know what else to do with her, and that's what he was recommended by a friend. Marry her. It is historical fiction, so it's set in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so the agreement is Luke will look after her and Philly will be the cook and housekeeper. Well, as can imagine, in the forced proximity, feelings begin to develop between the two. Some readers might find this book a little bit steamy with the kissing lessons and the character appreciation of their partner's physical appearance, but the fact that it's two strangers that are married to one another made me want them to be drawn to one another. And nothing ever crossed the line or made either character feel uncomfortable or myself feel uncomfortable as I was reading it. I loved Luke. His caring and trying to do what is right, and his immediate protection of Philly, and knowing what she's gone through. And Philly is just being such a strong character to be able to survive the treatment that she endured under her father, and kind of the challenges that she's experienced in life, and still be the strong character that she is. I really enjoyed this book. So again, it was a 5-star for me. So the last two books that I'm going to talk about. So one was the Christmas Wishes and Cowboy Kisses novella collection. So this is a 23 novella collection from 23 different authors. And I picked it up mainly because of Shanna Hatfield had a story in here that is associated with her rodeo romance series. So that is the whole reason I got this collection. Because it was so big, I decided I was going to read 2 or 3 novellas in between every book that I finished. So I started this collection at the beginning of November, finished at the end of November, and just read it in between finishing other books that I was reading. But it still felt very long, even though I broke it up that way. And there were multiple errors in some of the stories that really had me questioning how weren't they caught? That just annoyed me. I am positive that in 2 separate stories there are character names that are messed up. For example, one character is said to have said something during a conversation, but that character wasn't even in the building at the time. As I finished each story, I would rate it on its own and make notes of my thoughts. I then took the average, added all those ratings up, took the average of 23, divided by 23 to get the average, which gave me a 3-star rating. There were 2 stories that I rated 5 stars and 5 stories that I rated 4 stars. The rest were all between 1 and 3 for me. The 2 favorite stories of this collection were Taming Christmas by Shanna Hatfield. So this one is part of the Rodeo Romance series and features characters of Huck and Mara Powell. This story begins with them sending their children off to their grandparents' house, and then they start reminiscing about how they initially met. Readers are then inserted into the flashback and get to follow their journey of falling in love. I loved the way this was done, and I'm so glad that I finally got to know Huck and Mara's story after seeing them in so many of the previous book. When we first met them in book 1 of Rodeo Romance, they were already married at the time and already had a kid. And so we've seen them over the years, but we never knew their story. It was also very interesting to see some of the other characters before their stories were even written. However, I don't think you need to know any of these characters to enjoy this story. I think this story could totally stand on its own. So then my other favorite was Her Christmas Cowboy Billionaire by Cynthia Wolfe. I have never read anything by Cynthia Wolfe before, and I'm definitely going to be looking out for more by her. So Kaylee goes into witness protection at Ryan's ranch while waiting to testify at trial against her drug lord boss. As Ryan and Kaylee get to know each other, they develop feelings. Meanwhile, the drug lord has discovered where Kaylee is hiding and comes after her. I loved the strength of Kaylee and her eagerness to try anything. The characters were likable, and I was cheering for the good guys to win. and I enjoyed the way it ended. So the other 5 that I rated 4 stars that I would definitely be interested in reading other works from these authors are The Christmas Tree Cowboy by Melissa McClone, A Cowboy for Christmas by Terry Laura, Candy Canes and Cowboys by Marcy St. James, A Christmas Kiss for the Cowboy by April Murdoch, and Harvey's Christmas Catastrophe by R.L. Ashley. So one of my favorite quotes that I took from this was, "Sometimes it's okay to take a chance on someone God has brought back into your life." And that quote was taken from The Cowboy's Christmas Surprise. So I totally recommend this just to find new authors, because majority of these authors I had never read from, and I have found 6 that I wouldn't mind reading other stories from. So then the last book I read for the month was Things I Never Told You by Beth Vogt. Now, I did a reading vlog, a reading check-in for day 3 of Bookmas when I was reading this one. So I will link that video below, and you can see kind of what my thoughts were when I was reading the second half of this book, because I'd already started it before I started that video. So basically, this is book 1 of the series, the Thatcher Sisters series. So the series features all 3 sisters. Peyton is the youngest, who is the main character of this one. And then Jillian is the middle sister, who is a secondary character of this one. The point of view regularly switches between the 2 sisters. Jillian has just gotten engaged and then discovers a life-threatening illness. Peyton lost her twin sister 10 years ago and has recently begun having dreams of her. She is haunted by her sister's death and is searching for peace, but has no use for God. An old friend, Zach, re-enters her life, wanting to apologize for his actions of the past. And even though she pushes him away numerous times, he's determined to help her work through her issues and show her that God cares. This story deals with some very tough circumstances. I struggled to connect with Peyton, though she pushed everyone away and was determined to handle everything on her own. But I became very invested in Jillian's story, and when I was reading her parts, I didn't want to switch to any other character. I liked majority of the secondary characters, especially the 2 best friends and the fiancé Jeff. I did not like the oldest sister, Joanna. She just irked me, and I wanted her to listen to what her sisters were trying to tell her and to just back off. There is one point where she does something very sweet for Jillian, but then she ruins that gesture in the very next moment by trying to control her life again. I hated the way this ended. I was left dumbfounded, and it just left so unfinished. Like, I read it and it was like, and then I went to go turn the page and that was it. What? I realized this is book 1 of the series, but it just ended so abruptly that I felt so like, what? Like, what did I just read? So where it ends is Peyton is at the point of making some decisions in both her personal and professional life, but we're left with no clues to what decision she actually makes. So I guess you have to pick up book 2 to find out, assuming it will carry on. I'm pretty sure it will, probably. But my big question was, will she learn to trust God? So that was the last book I read for the month. So basically, my favorite book that I read in the month of November, or my 2 favorites, the 2 that I gave 5 stars to, were Capital Gains by Chip Gaines and The Christmas Bargain by Shanna Hatfield. So because The Christmas Bargain is a reread, this is going to be my favorite book for the month, because I really enjoyed it, and it was inspirational to kind of get you thinking about life and what you want to do going forward. I think I read this at the perfect time for me. So yeah. So those are the books that I read in November. So I had a pretty good reading month. I got 8 books finished and a huge book. So yeah. So I'd love to know, what was your favorite book that you read in November? Please leave it in the description below. And if you like these videos, I would love if you would like and subscribe to the channel, and then join me again tomorrow for Bookmas Day 6. Thank you. Bye.